Good afternoon. This is Ronald Allen with Managing Change Through Effective Communications. And today's discussion topic is the words you use define your emotions. So what do I mean? Think about how you may actually be setting yourself up to stumble, to cause more anxiety in your communications with people that you're trying to communicate with, trying to get a point across, trying to share an idea. And using defined words in a very conversational manner can mean the difference between being rebuffed and pushed back, and or preferably those that embrace you. So I'd like to do a quick exercise with you. I'm going to read off a few words, and for those who would like, by all means, just give me like a thumbs up if you say, yes, that's the order, the preferred order, either A or B. And I'm just going to do a quick exercise in how when we speak with one another, when we talk to one another, it is the sequence that kind of lays up, as we say in cricket, for a six, or baseball, a home run. So here are the words: contempt, anger, fear, guilt, shame, sadness, surprise, excitement, and joy. Now, if someone started off a conversation using those types of words, would that be preferred to you than happiness, excitement, discovery, joy, elation, guilt, shame, contempt, and disgust? So if you would, just give us a little, there you go, there's a little heart there, maybe a thumbs down for one, a thumbs up for two. Let's try it that order. And the reason why I say this is that in the English way of speaking, and certainly in the what's referred to as the 7 human emotions, and we're going to also kind of tongue-in-cheek play with that, we have more words that express disgust, disdain, unhappiness than we do words that support and elate us. So right from the bat, just as in some of our earlier discussions, we talk about the conditioning, the programming, the introduction. For those who don't like the word propaganda, programming. You are programmed. There is no doubt about it. Read the science, read the research. We're always programmed. Our very environment, our social environment, our inclinations come from somewhere. That is programming. It doesn't have to be ones and zeros. So when we start speaking with other people, be careful how we position or preface an argument, a position, a preference, a request. Now, another part of this is also very interesting. If you Google emotions, you're going to see research from some of the greatest institutions, the well-funded, well-meaningful intent, research-based institutions refer to 7 human emotions. And then you'll see 4 core emotions. And then you might even stumble across Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So my question to you, and not to dispel them, because that's not what we're about with Managing Change Through Effective Communications. We're about bringing resources that you decide, you evaluate, you determine how they should be used. And based on the litmus test of life, your feedback that you get from the marketplace, you'll then reformulate, repurpose, recontextualize, redesign your approach. So you're always moving forward. You're always stepping a little further, maybe not as much as you wanted or intended or wished for, but certainly always moving forward with what results you get instead of feeling guilty, disgruntled, put down. So now when you look up these words, when we talk about defining words defining a problem, when we look up these so-called 7 human emotions, 4 core emotions, Maslow's hierarchy of need, which has been around forever and certainly widely accepted. My only concern about that, as I get older and I experience different people's order of responses, is that do they really do they withstand the test of time? Or do we have to adjust based on the situation we're in? Isn't that language? Isn't that protocol of understanding someone's needs and changing up in order to embrace and engage them more fully through discovery? So here's another aspect I found interesting, and that is we can even throw in the 7 deadly sins, can't we? If we look at the order of words and we find that there are more, typically when people talk about emotions, they're typically more expressed. Not that the words are not there, the positive words, the reinforcing words, the encouraging words. It's not that they're not there. It's that our programming brings the negative up first. Here's a classic. Life is hard. Well, here's a response. Who said it was easy? Another stage to that is, where did you get the notion that life was supposed to be anything else? You see? So when we start asking these questions to ourselves, we arrest the emotional diarrhea that we put out in our communities, in our vocabulary, in our discussions with other people. We arrest that stinking thinking because we're looking at it purely as this is life. This is, I'm trying to accomplish something, so let me just think a moment. Let me put my word, my scripts. It's amazing, you know, people hate cold calling. They hate dialing for dollars and all these kind of marketing. Yet they are the fundamental structures by which they optimize their return. What a concept. Have you ever thought that you could use that same psychology, that same scripting of order of words and mold and manipulate them? Absolutely. I have no problem with the word manipulation. If you think you're not being manipulated, you've missed the last 20 years of social media. So we can throw in those 7 deadly sins, but why is it that we have to have so a loud a voice of what is negative? What if we chose every day, every moment, every conversation to frame our engagement in a more positive way? A little work, to be sure. Let me share with you some additional information here I've found, and I'm gonna. Some of you might be wondering. I got someone saying, "What's the light over here?" This little light is really a little joke. My wife and I, well, my wife bought this. It's obviously lights in a bottle, and just like words define our conversation and therefore our emotions, I'm going to share with you a little joke story of what the significance is of this. And I'm just going to pull it over. Someone must have seen it. I'm going to pull it over there. There you go. But it's ironically plays to the discussion that we're having. Also, you know the movie Sling Blade, where this individual who seems to have a communication issue, is asked to work on a lawnmower. And everybody has looked over the lawnmower, turned it upside down, inside out. And just by taking a moment of pause and understanding what is required for a lawnmower to work, the expression was, ain't got no gas in it. Maybe if we take that same approach with communicating with one another, in getting our teams to work, supervisors, managers, especially you feel that you're under pressure from above, and you push that pressure down on your people unwittingly, arrogantly in some cases, fearfully in others, you compound the negative side of what would otherwise be a nice engagement, a good initiative, a project that everyone would like to galvanize around and share their intellectual capital. You've dispelled that. You've smashed their engagement, in a term, on the rocks of despair and frustration. Let me just see. I've got some other information here which I just kind of pulling together. There is some research through an institution out of Glasgow that talks about biological and social evolutionary pressures. Now, this is really interesting. I want you to think back a second. Go back, whoops, go back 5 or 10 years. Go back to stages in your life that were very significant. And what this research talks about is that our biology creates certain enzymes, certain chemicals, that given different situations, drives us to behave in certain ways. The evolutionary side of this, in terms of our intelligence, our learning, experiential, divides us into kind of a number of groups, 3 groups. One, reactionary. And most of us know it, we don't address it. We don't consciously pause that excitement, that thrust, that torque, if you will. We don't pause it and say, wait a minute, do I want to go there? Do I need to go there? The second stage is surprise and fear of your response, given the social environment that you're in. A case would be you're at work and you're working on a project, you're trying to get something done, and perhaps as simple as the printing job wasn't completed in time. Perhaps as frustrating as and technical as grammar has not been checked and you've got the final 5,000 copies. Maybe you're testing QC in a pharmaceutical or a manufacturing environment, and you can add your observations, yet you are fearful because of the level of impact it would have on the project. These are also means of, when we communicate, it is our emotion that drives the definition of what we think will come back. It drives what we believe is the engagement of your other peers in a group. And you can, as usual, I always refer this to both professional and personal. In a family, you'll see that the dynamics, the hierarchy of need, if you will, back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, drives the relationships in a family. And those that can push a little harder, are willing to push their comfort level over that comfort boundary, they usually get what they want because others succumb to that. We've seen it in business, we see it in families, we see it in all social groups. We certainly see it in professional organizations. So when we talk about biological, think of your own physical development, your own brain developing, your learning style, and see if you can identify that when you've entered into a conversation, what was the precursor to either engage and note not engage? Remember, silence, non-speaking, non-verbal is a form of communication. So when you decide not to put your intellectual capital on the table at work or in a professional organization, like I'm part of Toastmasters, part of project management, what have you removed from the table, the possibilities? Maybe if we look at it in that fashion, we just might turn things around. We just might decide, you know what? I don't want to have the negative basic emotions. I want to focus on the positive. So in kind of wrapping up, but I wanted to share 2 or 3 other things with you. I mentioned this little glass. This is a battery. And as you can see, There are lights in it. And you stick it in any old bottle, right? But it's run on a AA battery. The significance of this and our discussion today is, typically, and those of you who are handy people in the home, typically, and again, through a thumbs up, if you acknowledge that typically, when you look inside and you see the little spring, you usually place the base of the battery on the spring. Well, for the last 3 days, when we simply purchased it, I think it's like $1, $2, we couldn't get this to work, and we went through, at least 5 or 6 of these AA, I think they're AA batteries. Well, guess what? Tonight, something said to me, how about just reversing it? How about just seeing if there's any gas in it? And all I did was, instead of putting it in the way that I have been accustomed to, the language that we speak, the interpretation, the perceptions, the already heard, the attitude, I decided to reverse it. So if I put it in with the base against the spring and I complete the circuit, it doesn't work. But if I can reverse my mindset, and put the node, this node here, against the spring, which is against my thinking, that's my point here. It works. It's got gas in it. So I'm hoping that kind of made a little point. It's very interesting. Our attitudes, I'm just going to pull this up here. Our attitudes define us. Our attitudes, yep, there it is. Sorry about that, guys. I pressed something and my whole screen disappeared. So there is an example of how we define the words, our thinking, and we therefore define an engagement. We define what we anticipate instead of testing, instead of being a little bit more open-minded, instead of looking at the negative human basic emotions and reorganizing it. I would rather say, and I would look at human emotions. Now, I know a lot of this is supposed to be researched. What if you could take the research you need that supports your intentions, your desired outcomes, instead of falling back on someone else's, which may very well be research-based, absolutely. Are we not an evolutionary species? Are we not able to evolve to determine? That is the difference between us and other animals. We can make the distinctions. We can assess a situation and change its meaning. That's the significance of us as animals and any other animal. So I submit to you, Maslow's law notwithstanding, change your wording, change your scripts, change the intent of your engagement, right? We talk about depression, pain, suffering, stages of disconnect from reality. That's what those are. Depression, pain, and suffering. They are stages of disconnect from reality. And this example here is a very simple way of showing that. When you feel disgusted, as I have, and as I've said to you before, I've shared with many of you, in fact, I'll even share this concept, which I believe is timely. Do you want to just be coached or mentored by someone who is doing well, or someone who's going through it? Don't have to use negative words or, crass words. Do you want to just be coached by someone who has the right wording, who comes from, we use the word pedigree, or has the right credentials? Or do you want to understand someone and be working with someone who understands your pain? I guarantee you, I can go as deep as I need to pull people back, because I've been there. And at my age, Most of us are downsizing ourselves. We're walking away from life instead of engaging in it. Depression is a result of something you're missing. A definition in life that you thought should be there. A result, an outcome. Just because you've worked hard, just because you've put in the right time, just because you've gone to the right schools, just because you've got the right credentials, life doesn't deliver. Only you do. And we can do that by adjusting our meaning to what is happening. We can subscribe to a different set of principles because of the way life comes at us individually. We talk about thinking outside the box. Who the hell put you in it? And the fact that you accept that is another set of problems. Why are we so quick when we talk about being unique and then we talk about, in the same sentence, thinking outside the box? It's a conundrum. It doesn't make sense. We have to take what we're learning, test it against life. That's the ultimate litmus test. And based on that feedback, we must be willing to adjust. And it takes a little time. It takes the programming of our mind and a willingness to go until you achieve it. It's not try again. It's try until you get it. That's the difference. So I'm going to finish up here with build your own emotional vocabulary. Build your own emotional vocabulary and express yourself. Capital Y, capital S, for those grammarians among you. Capital Y, capital S, and express yourself. You know, there's a great song in the 60s, Express Yourself. I'm not a singer, so I'm not going to haunt your ears with my terrible voice. But you can certainly Google that on YouTube. Express yourself. Build your own emotional vocabulary and express yourself. And I'll finish up with this great slogan, which, you know, some of you, as you see behind me, my Chutsky, my bookcase. This is just a small bookcase in my office. I have the main library over there. It's about attitude. And yes, I know it's been said a million times. Guess what? Say it a million more. Say it until it becomes reality. I'm not talking about just a blind mantra, because as you can see, now I'm back to an everyday session. Why do I do it? It's an attitude. It's a building stamina. It's building courage. It's fortifying my research capabilities. It's on a beat that makes me uncomfortable and forces me to get to the point. Bring value. And as my numbers of people who have been engaging with me seem to build, that's my litmus test of value I bring to these live chats. Attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, your home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every single day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one thing we have, and that is our individual attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I respond. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. Charles Swindoll. Build your own vocabulary. Reinforce it every minute of every day. And you'll find that very quickly all the drama, all the ugliness, all the noise will be minimized. and you will manage the few incidences and certainly life's changes with a little bit more reality to the bigger picture that we all live in. So whether you're managing a billion-dollar organization, whether you're implementing a new initiative, a community center, a nonprofit, think of your legacy. Think of how you're interpreting, how others are interpreting what you're doing in the name that you subscribe to. Because it is in the words that will define our emotions and therefore drive our actions. And after all, it is our actions that are left on the table. And yes, I'm not in a good position. And yes, I do owe people obligations. And yes, I am in an uncomfortable place. And yes, I do believe in what I'm doing, because this too shall pass. This is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. You know where to find me.